Back to the top of the Premier League with a 2-1 victory over Brighton, but it should have been plenty more than that. This is today's Arsenal reaction show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is indeed the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show, joining you after the afternoon before, in which Arsenal claimed all 3 points against the Seagulls at the Emirates Stadium, returning them to the top of the Premier League despite their title-chasing rivals also picking up victories in tricky away games. Arsenal had to get their job done, and they did just that. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box. Thank you so much as always for doing so. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Good morning to Mandy and Steve and Zoom and Shinral. We've got Mandy, we've got Matt G, we've got Steve, we've got Claire, we've got Knowledge and Ola, we've got JR, we've got Coldfire and Paul. Good morning to you. CMOS in the chat box as well. Jerome seeing you this morning. Obi Ben, Ben Kenobi. No I. I wonder where that is. Was it taken? Is that why you can't have it? Maybe it is. That might be the reason. Shari, good morning to you. And plenty more of you guys and girls in the chat box as well. Thank you so much, as always, for doing so and for joining us. Spearmint says, Man United have a better chance of winning 5 than Tom starting on time. Well, I started at 8, so unfortunately, mate, you got that one wrong. But good morning to those joining us live in the chat box. Really appreciate your time. And I hope that you're going to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show with us. Let's not waste any more time and jump straight into the chat box. I look forward, of course, to hearing plenty of your thoughts and feelings about today's game. And let's begin, of course, with the fact that we should have won by more. I think we should have won by plenty more than Arsenal's sole couple of goals that they managed against Brighton. It was very much a strong performance overall from the Gunners, and we needed to see that in the wake of course, what have been a couple of difficult results. I know that we've managed to win the games, that penalty victory over Palace, the 1-goal win over Everton, and our very, very narrow victory over Wolves. But it has been a bit of a period of time where Arsenal have not been able to necessarily just blitz teams or beat teams at a canter, even though the performances certainly in the last 2 games should have led to that. And even at Everton as well, Arsenal should have won by more. Our finishing is coming under a bit of scrutiny at the moment, and I think fairly so. We need to score more chances. We need to take these opportunities better, and we need to be putting some teams away to the sword more successfully as well. But we move to the lineup, which I think surprised a lot of people. Seeing Declan Rice at right, but I know the lineup, of course, what was shown on kind of the graphic was not what we then eventually saw. And interestingly so, during the warm-ups, Zubimendi was starting as the right-back in the warm-ups as well. He was standing and playing with Saliba and Nkapie, and then, of course, Miles Lewis-Skelly, because Calafiori didn't start the game. Calafiori unable to start the game after feeling something in the warm-up. Hopefully he is okay, but they didn't want to take any risks, and Arteta didn't seem to give too much in the way of explanation. He said he felt something yesterday, or rather the day before the game. They hoped that he was going to be okay and fine to play, but it was decided during the warm-up that no, the decision was taken overall to not risk him after seeing how he felt during the warm-up before the game, which, considering we've got Villa in just a few days' time, that's really, really, I guess, a good thing that we didn't make the same mistake that they made with, say, Saliba at Anfield, and that instead the decision was taken early as soon as he felt something slightly uncomfortable for him not to play. But it meant that without Jurriën Timber, who was also absent from the game, that we had to start with a different type of fullback to what we have ever done before. And Declan Rice, for the first time since an 11-minute cameo in 2017 for West Ham United in a 3-3 draw against Bournemouth, had to play right back for the second time in his Premier League career. And did very well. I think we'll talk about Declan Rice a lot more in this video. But there were other changes to be made. Marino, of course, remained in the midfield from that game against Palace. Gyokeres, Trossard and Saka coming into the starting lineup with Martin Ødegaard as well. Zubimendi maintaining that number 6 role also. So very much a positive result and a positive performance considering the limitations around the 11. The other big news, of course, the lineup, which we'll talk about later, was Gabriel's return to the bench. I reported that, of course, he and Kai Havertz were pushing to return before the end of the year, and that's 1 ticked and 1 to go. Let's see if Kai Havertz can be involved in that game against Villa in some way, shape or form. If not, hopefully as soon as he possibly can into January. And finally, Arsenal score early in a game and take the lead early in a game, because we have been waiting for a little while for that to be the case and hoping that Arsenal's early goal would propel them to a significant victory. And when Arsenal took a 2-goal lead, courtesy of that Jorginho Rutter own goal from Declan Rice's corner, I certainly thought and felt that we were on the way to a very comfortable victory, but it wasn't to be. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we need to first talk about Martin Ødegaard, because what a performance from Arsenal's captain. And I'm very grateful that it was the performance that we saw from Ødegaard that we got. And looking a little bit deeper into his performance, and if you want to go over to the Football.London website, I've written an entire piece just really dedicated in the most part. There's a lot of other stuff in that piece, but just in the most part about Martin Ødegaard, which gives you a little bit of an idea of why and how he had such a good game against Brighton. I mean, he was first in terms of goals, joint first, of course, with Rutter's own goal and Diego Gomez's goal as well. But first for goals in the game, of course, joint first with the other 2 goal scorers. He was first when it came to chances created with 5. He was first with defensive line-breaking passes with 3. He had a really good game. He was fantastic, and he had actually created 8 line-breaking passes as well from his own half, and has just really arrived. I hope he's arrived really at this point, and I hope this is the arrival of Martin Ødegaard really this season. Following those injuries, he needed a big game soon, and it came in this game, and we need that on a consistent basis now from Martin Ødegaard. I said the other day when he came on against Crystal Palace for Eze, we looked so much better when he came off the bench. He just immediately created that chance that should have been scored for the cross into the box. And we just looked better when Ødegaard came onto the field. And I love Declan Rice's reaction as well to Ødegaard's goal. I don't know if you caught that in the ramifications of his goal. As Ødegaard runs away to celebrate, Rice joins him, and Rice is furiously pointing at him, saying, he is the guy. That is what that whole action is about. This is the man. Ødegaard is our captain. This is him. He is him. And I get fed up of all the captaincy debates because they're so pointless and they're so lacking in nuance and common sense, in my opinion, because the idea of when you're sitting top of both tables and you're challenging for titles on a regular basis and you want to create a story that makes the captaincy even bigger than it is by taking it off him, and then Tony Adams coming out and saying the horrible things that he said before the season. I mean, why on earth he felt appropriate to turn around and say that at the start of the season again, just to create this undertone of frustration and division. It makes zero sense for me for that to happen. And Ødegaard had a fantastic game as a result. He played more so as kind of a 10. He still dropped in, and I know people get frustrated. Frustrated around the idea that he drops in too much and kind of sits in those defensive midfield positions. But when he does that, Zubi pushes forward. And we'll talk a little bit about Zubi as well. Like, the whole midfield structure is designed to do that. It's designed to be in that way. And I think when you consider how Arsenal dominated possession, naturally Ødegaard was at the absolute centre of that. Bukayo Saka, we need to talk about a little bit more critically. He had 7 shots against Brighton, which is the most by an Arsenal player who failed to score in a Premier League game since Saka himself against Leicester in 2024, when he had 7 shots and failed to score. He was decent on the day, Saka. He had a decent game. But in terms of his output, that's the area of Saka's game that was worthy of criticism. Of course, he did get the assist where he kind of laid the ball off to Saka inside. Ødegaard inside, where he had that shot from outside the box. But I think we need to see some better clinical edge to Saka's game. We need to see some more outcome from Saka's game. We need to see some better decision-making a little bit more in Saka's game in these types of matches. There's no doubt he's still been up there with our best players this season. That's not really up for debate, but we're just kind of nitpicking here and wanting more from Saka. And there are some moments where maybe a better decision could have been taken. I know that he's technically is still kind of feeling his rhythm back after these 2 significant hamstring injuries to an extent, but I want to see more from him. I want to see him able to have a much more impactful game than we saw yesterday with the opportunities that were available to him. Of course, he had that really good one-on-one opportunity right at the end, which he absolutely should have done a lot better with. He created a fantastic chance for Martinelli, which we'll also talk about in a little bit as well, which is definitely worthy of praise. But I just want to see a little bit more from Saka. I just want to see a little bit more of that kind of world-class quality that we know that he has. And this just wasn't necessarily the most fine game from him. I still think I gave him a 7 for his contributions in the game, but he needs to take it to the 8s and the 9s on a more regular basis at the moment, does Saka, and that will come by being somewhat more clinical in the final third and making some better decisions. But of course, we had to talk about as well Declan Rice, who was voted player of the match by the fan base. For me, Martin Ødegaard was the player of the match, but Declan Rice was certainly up there alongside him, as well as a couple of other potential nominees as well. But asked to play the right back position and did it fantastically well. Fantastically well. And I think that earns him a lot more plaudits as well than just by playing his normal midfield role. He was strong in the tackle. He was strong with the ball at his feet. He was strong in how he progressed the play. His delivery, of course, from the corner brought about Arsenal's second goal. He was absolutely up for taking that position, according to Mikel Arteta, who spoke after the game. He was downright well up for it, is basically the description that we got after the game. I don't think Arsenal fans... I saw a great tweet, actually, this morning, which was basically like putting a video of Declan Rice's tackle up in the game, and the caption was, Arsenal fans don't need to entertain the debates. And I think this is very true. I think we can just forget about it. If you see some rival fans trying to claim that their supposed midfielders are on the same level of Declan Rice, they're just not. They just aren't. Declan Rice is the best midfielder in the Premier League, and he's currently playing at right back for Arsenal. It's not a debate. It's not even close. It's not even close. Declan Rice is, and currently will be for the foreseeable future, Arsenal's best and most important player. He has been stunningly good this season once again, and what an amazing spend of money that was on a player. And again, another player, the signing of the season for me, continues to shine. Martin Zubimendi had an absolutely fantastic performance once again. Really liked the way in which he broke up the play in this game in midfield and kind of was like so good at reading the opportunity to spin away from players, but turn over possession. He was really unlucky not to score. Great kind of intuitive flicked effort to the near post, which Verbruggen struggled to get down to in kind of a chaotic pinball moment in the box as well. He, again, is another player that has taken that number 6 role to another level. He has just evolved that position to another level. And I think he makes those around him as well so much better. He makes Rice a better midfielder when Zubi's there. He makes Ødegaard, for me, a better player when he's partnering in midfield. He just is, overall, a very, 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 very good player. And very impressed, again, with Martin Zubimendi's performance on the day. And the aggression, I think, that was shown by a number of players in the field. I think Pierre Hincapié had a good game. I think that Saliba had a good game. I do think Miles Lewis-Skelly struggled a bit. You know, obviously he came into the game cold somewhat because he wasn't expected to start this game. And he had a little bit of a difficult game at Palace, against Palace as well. Am I concerned? No, I'm not concerned. He's a young player and, you know, he's not had enough consistent minutes this season to build up any rhythm whatsoever. But there are, I think, some moments in these games that just didn't happen last season. You know, he's just making some decisions that aren't particularly great. And there's some composure moments that are a little bit in question. But I'm not concerned about Miles at this stage. He absolutely needs more time and needs more minutes to be able to build up the rhythm that we saw him get last season. We know his talent. We know what he is capable of. And we know that he will come good in time as well, once again. But I think the man that deserves as much credit as any man of the match or top performer for keeping Arsenal in possession of all 3 points is this man, David Raya. I mean, David Raya is a player that at Arsenal is not too busy a lot of the time at Arsenal in terms of having to make saves. He hasn't got to constantly be making big stops and being peppered with opportunities. Like, I mean, you look at like Chelsea's Robert Sanchez gets a lots of praise because that's because he gets lots of opportunities to show that he's a decent shot stopper, because Chelsea concede so many chances. David Raya doesn't concede too many chances because he has an excellent team ahead of him that limit the number of opportunities that he faces. But that makes it much more challenging as a goalkeeper to stay switched on for the entirety of the game. And that when you are then called upon to make a big save, you need to be there to make it. And my word, was David Raya there to make that absolutely astonishing world-class save from Yankuba Minter, who struck the ball about as well as he possibly could have done. And that the effort is certainly curling into the back of the net. David Raya managed to get a strong hand on it and tip the ball over the crossbar and give Arsenal the solidity to remain 2-1 in front and eventually to go and claim all 3 points. That action was as important as any goal, any moment in this season. It is as important as that. What a brilliant save. What a brilliant moment. And, he had a little bit of a tricky first half. Some of his distributions wasn't as good and accurate as they usually are, and he gave the ball away a couple of times, which did affect his overall rating, but it didn't matter really too much about how we felt about his performance in the end, because he produced an absolutely fine save. I don't really think he was at fault too much for the first goal. I don't think he can do too much about that. The shot hits the post, it's out of his reach, and the rebound is very difficult to respond to get anything on it. So I don't have too many criticisms, if any, of the first goal, but the save from Minter is just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It was great to see Big Gabi back out there once again, and to see him in the squad and then coming off the bench. And it's a good sign that he played as many minutes as he did. I think he got, 20-25 minutes on the field, replacing Lewis Skelly and Cappier moving to left back. I did enjoy Cappier's performance at left back. I think it kind of took him a little bit out of the focus, and maybe Cappier was a little bit lacking in alertness for their first goal, for Brighton's only goal of the game. But very happy to see Gabriel back. His aggression, his presence, he needs to be in this Arsenal team. And I tell you what, Chelsea and Villa were incredibly lucky to come up against an Arsenal team that had neither of Saliba nor Gabriel in the back line when they played them. So lucky to come up against an Arsenal team that had neither. And I'm very glad that when we next play Villa in just 2 days' time, and of course when we play Chelsea in the League Cup semi-final, we hope, fingers crossed, that both Saliba and Gabriel are going to be fully available for those games. Fit, firing, ready, returned, and in top condition for the Chelsea games. I doubt for the Villa game that Gabi will be in his absolute best phase, but hopefully Gabriel can start that game against Villa after getting some important minutes in this game. But we will wait and see what happens there with Big Gabi. But great to see him back in the squad. Great to see him back involved and hopefully building up some match sharpness very soon. Right, here's your Victor Gyokeres warning. If you don't like anybody saying anything slightly critical about the man, now's your time to switch off. I know there are some sensitive souls in this fan base, so I just thought it'd be well enough to warn you before we go into a little bit of a concerning couple of slides about the Swedish striker. I'll be very honest with you. It was a bad performance from Victor Gyokeres in this game. I think we have to be very honest about that. 70 minutes in the game, 2 shots, just 3 completed passes, 16 touches. Did create 2 shot-creating actions. One of those actions was that header, of course, which was kind of close range, which then led to that Zubimendi chance in the follow-up. So it's not like a direct shot-creating action. But the first shot, kind of 2 minutes into the game, was really tame. Like, it was a really good opportunity. I think that opportunity within the first couple of minutes was a lot bigger than it felt. I think because it happened so early on in the game, therefore it kind of lost itself amongst what happened in the rest of the game. But that chance in the first minute, I don't really know what happens. He kind of just taps the ball into the goalkeeper's hands, yeah, it wasn't ideal. The other shot that he had in the game was, of course, when he smacked the ball again for Bruggen's chest on the right hand side. He absolutely blasts it, which is what he probably should have done in the first minute, of actually hammered the ball rather than just tapping it back into the Belgian goalkeeper's hands. I think he's Belgian, Verbruggen. I'm pretty sure he is. But I think what's most damning always is when we look at kind of the stats of Gyokeres, of starting a game, playing 70 minutes. It's when you compare them to what Jesus does when he comes off the bench. So 70 minutes, 2 shots, 3 completed passes, 16 touches, 2 shot creating actions. You compare that to the 20 minutes that Jesus started, 14 touches, so that's just 2 less than Victor Gyokeres, despite playing for less than half of the amount of time on the field. 7 completed passes, so more than double the number of completed passes, despite, again, spending less than half the time that Victor Gyokeres on the field. Same number of shots in the game with 2. One of those was that kind of really difficult ball as it kind of fell to the ground from a great height, and he had to try and swipe it, and eventually it was blocked. And 1 shot creating action in the game as well, half of what Gyokeres made, but in less than half of the time that he was on the field. Jesus has to start against Villa. Has to start against Villa. It's really difficult, I think, for us to have these conversations without it already feeling like people are picking sides, that people are kind of like getting into these camps, because it's something about Arsenal, or some, I should always say some. It's something about some Arsenal fans that are desperate always to put themselves into a category, or to ask somebody else what category they are in. Are you Arteta in? Are you Arteta out? Are you Arsene knows best? Are you Wenger out brigade? Are you Team Gyokeres, or are you Team Jesus, or are you Team Havertz? Like, I don't get the incessant desire to always plaster an opinion on your shirt as if you're wearing it like your own team. This is just the reality. So don't misinterpret this discussion as anything more than just a discussion about the centre-forward position at the moment. But what we've seen from Gabriel Jesus in the last 4 or 5 games has been better than what we have seen from Victor Gyokeres in the last 4 or 5 games. If I could combine Gyokeres' clinical finishing with everything else in Jesus' game, I'd be absolutely delighted to have that centre forward. We don't have that centre forward right now. Is Kai Havertz going to be that centre forward when he comes back? I don't know. You don't know. We will wait and see. He looked blooming clinical in pre-season, of course, before he got that injury, and it was a real shame that he did get that injury, because I think actually Gyokeres would have really benefited from having Havertz available in the squad as well. But where I am at with this scenario is that Jesus may not be a clinical centre forward, but the thing is that when Jesus is on the field, every player around him is better as a result of Jesus being on the field. We are better, we're more fluid, we look more like a team that are going to threaten than we do when Victor is on the field at the moment. That is the reality. That needs to change, and that ability for that to change is in the hands of Victor, or in the feet of Victor, if you like. Still needs the season. He still needs to be given the time before we come to a proper judgment about whether or not he's been a good signing or not. But you have to reward the performances and the output and what you're seeing on the pitch with minutes. And at the moment, 3 days between 2 games, Jesus has played 20 minutes here, Gyokeres has played 70. When you've got, it's not just about who I think is better to start the game against Villa, it's also about rotation. And a lot of you have been saying Arteta needs to be better at rotating. He needs to be better at managing the minutes of players. Well, let's manage the minutes of Victor here, who has played 70 minutes against Brighton. And in 3 days' time, we've got another game. Let's start the player that only played 20 minutes at centre forward in this game and swap those 2 around for that Villa match. So that's kind of where I'm at with those 2 and what I think should happen in the next game. Again, it just felt like we had to take our chances more in this game overall. Martinelli comes off the bench. Encouraging performance from Martinelli, certainly in terms of kind of his movement, in terms of what he was doing with the ball. But again, lacked that clinical edge. Had to score the chance. Saka puts the ball on a plate for him. Saka should end this game with 2 assists, not just 1. And Martinelli should absolutely be taking this opportunity and doesn't. And is rightly criticised for not scoring that chance. But Saka as well, I've already talked about, 7 shots, 0 goals. First time a player has done that for Arsenal since that Leicester game, when Saka again had 7 shots and didn't score. So we need to find this way of, because if you're looking at Villa, like Villa is the antithesis of Arsenal right now. Low XG, high shot conversion. Arsenal right now is high XG, low shot conversion. Now, the positive is that if you are going to be one of those 2 over the course of a whole 38-game season or 50-game season, you probably want to be at the halfway point, the team that have got high XG, because the information tells us that with XG being the best predictive algorithmic model that we have in the game, that is not sustainable in terms of both sides. It's not sustainable that Arsenal should be creating this level of high XG and scoring this few amounts of goals. Villa, of course, with this low level of XG and a high level of shot conversion, and it does come with an element of luck. I mean, look at the goals that were scored against Villa as against Chelsea. I mean, the first goal, for instance, is Sanchez kind of rebounding the ball off Watkins' leg to get the goal, but it's not that XG level is not thought to be sustainable, and I'd rather have our situation right now than their situation right now, because the sense is, of course, where I think they created 0 XG in the first half against Chelsea, but they've come out with the win. Arsenal are coming out with the win, but they're not doing it convincingly enough. And that's what we need to see, is we need Arsenal to be better at taking these chances, because I don't know which pathway is going to follow. There are 2 pathways here. One of the pathways is, which is the one I hope for, which is the one that James Benge asked about after the game, which is that Arsenal are heading towards a real statement victory where this XG turns into goals. And Mikey, sorry, it's not to do with overplaying, Mikey, because if we were overplaying, we wouldn't have the XG as high as it is, because the chance would then never come. So it's not to do with overplaying. We're just not clinical enough. We're just not clinical enough. And so I'm hoping that we're heading down this pathway that will eventually see something click, and all of this high XG and chance creation turns into plenty of goals. The other pathway is the one that I fear, which is that we will continue to have our high XG, but we won't be clinical enough, and another team will take advantage of that, as Palace effectively nearly did against us the other day, and cost us important points in big games, or even not in necessarily the biggest of games. They're the 2 pathways that I see. I'm hoping that we're going down the former and not the latter. And maybe the return of Kai Havertz will, of course, help with that. But yeah, we need to find a way of being more clinical. It's not even a case of finding a way to be more clinical. We just need to be more clinical. We just need to be better at finishing our chances than we have been. And these are competent footballers, very good footballers. They play for the team currently sitting where they sit in both the Premier League and the Champions League. We are good enough to finish the chances. It's just a confidence thing. I think it's a mental thing. And then we need to overcome that. And once we've overcome that, you would hope that it would just snowball and gradually rise and get even greater, and we'd score more chances. But we'll see. So this is what the table looks like after the kind of the action that the majority of the Premier League sides that have played this weekend are involved with right now. Arsenal, of course, still 2 points ahead of Manchester City, who won their game at Nottingham Forest. Man City and Villa definitely in plenty of strong form. That defeat, of course, against Villa still sitting as a bit of a red mark on Arsenal's recent track record. Liverpool managed to hold on to a 2-1 win over Wolves in what was a very emotional day at Anfield, celebrating the life of Diogo Jota. They won 2-1 in that fixture. Chelsea are in total freefall. To think, of course, when Arsenal played that league game against Chelsea, and people were talking about how Chelsea was still very much in the title race, even maybe more so than Arsenal at that point because of the way in which the 2 sides were judged. They currently sit 13 points now behind Arsenal and are out of the race. There is no title race for Chelsea this season. Anyone thinking otherwise, I don't know where on earth you're getting your information from, but Chelsea are nowhere near the title race and are utterly out of it, as are Liverpool, with 10 points behind Arsenal as well, but have managed to claw their way back up into 4th after winning their last 3 games. Further down the table, Manchester United now level on points with Chelsea after their most recent victory as well. They found some form at this stage of the season, but are now without Bruno Fernandes and were pretty dire against Newcastle, who were equally bad, and it was kind of the battle of the bad teams in that one. Sunderland in 7th, Brentford in 8th, Palace in 9th, Fulham in 10th, Everton 11th, Brighton in 12th, and Newcastle in 13th. Spurs play today. They're playing Crystal Palace, I believe, and they currently sit down in 14th, 20 points behind Arsenal as things stand. So, yeah, but remember, they finished 17th last season, so improvement. If you want to call it that. If you want to improve your internet security and the ability in which you have to stay safe while on the surf in the net, then of course there is only one place to go. And you don't want to go to a team that might sit 14th in the league and maybe put yourself at risk by picking yourself up some free service that's not perfect, that doesn't give you the safety and security that we know that this service guarantees you. And that, of course, is NordVPN. If you go to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan and 4 months extra thrown in free on top of that too. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not happy with the service for any reason. But change your geodigital location on your laptop, your mobile, or indeed your tablet device. Listen to your favorites while you're abroad in any of the territories that are supported by Nord, and shield your data from those snoopers and criminals that always want to take it from you. Don't make the mistakes that so many make. If you're using a public Wi-Fi service, you need a VPN. Otherwise, you put yourself at risk. Don't do it. Do this. Right, let's go to part 2. That's nordvpn.com/Gooner, by the way. I didn't mention that before. But yes, let's go to part 2. Your questions and more right after this. Right, let's talk about this game with you all in the chat box and get some of your thoughts and feelings discussed, because there is, of course, plenty to discuss in this game and what the ramifications of it might be going into that game against Aston Villa in just 2 days' time. 2 days is all that separates. It is a mad festive period, and I think from an Arsenal point of view, would they rather have this Villa game with a week's rest? Obviously, but also Villa have had slightly less time to recover, having played at Chelsea, and they've had to go away from home, of course, as well. When Arsenal played against Villa last time, they didn't have that same level of recovery and ended up paying for it, and also were missing a lot of their key players, which they've now got back. It should also be pointed out that Aston Villa have lost Boubacar Kamara and Matty Cash for this game. Both of them are suspended after they both picked up their 5th yellow cards of the season against Chelsea. So they'll be missing for the game, and they will have to replace them. I think it will be Ødegaard and Onana, of course, that come in. So, I mean, 2 strong players that are still coming in anyway. Right, let's go into the chat and tackle some of your comments. Mike says, it is interesting the level of grief Arsenal are getting for a 2-1 win compared to City or Villa, when arguably in both cases they gave up more chances than we did. What are your thoughts? I guess the obvious answer to this, Mike, is that both of them played tougher sides. I mean, City went away from home to Forest, who have been notoriously quite difficult for City in the past and have taken points off City. And, of course, Villa going away to Chelsea, a side that have already taken points off Arsenal and the like as well. So, again, they are more impressive results than Arsenal's was against Brighton. But you're right, Arsenal should have won their game at a canter. They were more dominant in their game than both City or Villa were, which isn't too surprising. But because Arsenal are still not being convincing enough, it's easy for critics to kind of point that out. And fairly, I think, as well. It's a fair criticism of Arsenal at the moment. Carl says, I think that we would benefit more from Jesus starting and Gyokeres coming on in around the 60th minute. There have been games like Wolves where we hoof it into the last 10 minutes and Jesus is not much use. Oh, I disagree with you. I mean, Jesus came on and was winning duels. The ball was going long, and he looked even more successful actually at winning kind of those long ball duels that he had to try and win, and does it so successfully. There was a point where he won the ball in the box on the left-hand side with a really long pass in behind and beat, I think, was it dunked to the ball, which is by no means an easy stretch. So I don't agree necessarily. I do think there is something to be said about the way in which the opposition's back line operates. And this comes in from Leroy, who agrees. He says, is it just me, or does the opponent's defensive line jump 20 yards higher the second Gyokeres is subbed off? It's like his presence is the only thing pinning them back. And it's true. You know, Gyokeres is the type to stay on the last man, play off the last man. And so teams will drop back to prevent Gyokeres from running in behind. And he has to feed off so little when it comes to kind of that situation, because it's so hard to create the type of chance that Gyokeres feeds best off, which is him running in behind. We don't get those types of chances all that often in games. And as a result, the chances that he does have, he needs to take with better clinical finishing, which we didn't see in yesterday's game. But yes, when Jesus comes on, he doesn't play off the last man. He drops in, so that defensive line pushes up. And as a result, ironically, we actually then get more opportunities to run in behind. We saw it with Bukayo Saka at the end of the game, had the opportunity for a one-on-one situation, which he should have done better with and should have scored from. But those situations don't happen as often because Gyokeres plays so much on the last man that those teams just drop back from a mid to a low block and prevent Arsenal from getting too many opportunities in behind. Micah says, poster buy is the only time that we've been efficient in attack. I don't understand that Mikel can't replicate that one-touch football. I think there's so many factors involved in this. You know, we're just talking about there the way in which the opposition sets up has a huge impact on us. We did play some really good one-touch football in this game, particularly down the right-hand side between Rice and Saka and Ødegaard. But it's not as free-flowing, as efficient as we saw it in 22-23. And we need to see some more of that. But again, that will come down more to the opposition as well and how the opposition operates against Arsenal. It's very different. I also want to ask you about the penalty call. Because I'm quite torn on this. Gabriel Jesus at the back post was, I think it's Kadiolu. Tell me if I'm wrong if it was. As Jesus is about to head the ball into the back of the net, he gets kind of an arm on his side and goes down, and then the player heads the ball out for a corner. Do you think that was a penalty or not? I'm quite torn. Because obviously Gyokeres had a similar situation at Everton. There was much less contact, I think, in this one, and went down, and obviously nothing was given. I lean on this not being a penalty more than I do it being a penalty. I think, and I've seen some people try and compare it to Cedric against Spurs in the 21-22 season. You remember that was a really important game for Arsenal where we should have really qualified for the Champions League that season. And across comes into the box. Son leaps to go for the ball. And Cedric kind of like, there's a very clear push from Cedric in Son's back while he's in the air. And Cedric then makes no attempt to win the ball. In this situation, Jesus isn't in the air. The ball is there to be won, and the defensive player wins the ball after the moment of contact. I just think Jesus and Gyokeres in both of those instances just need to be stronger. They need to be better aware of their surroundings. They need to hold those defenders off and not go down under that pressure and just win the header. I really do think that those need to be better. I think that the Son Spurs incident is a much more of a penalty shout than this one is, because in that example, Cedric makes little to no attempt for the ball and doesn't win it, whereas Son would have won the ball if it wasn't for Cedric's kind of intervention, and Cedric doesn't win anything afterwards, where in this instance, Jesus might have won the ball, but so might the defensive player, and he does win the ball, and Jesus isn't in the air either. So I don't think it's a penalty. It seems a lot of you in the chat box agree as well with this, and some of you don't. Charlie says, nah, not a pen for me. Lucas says, wasn't enough for me. It would have been a soft penalty. Spearmint says that they reviewed it as well, of course, and they did review it and decided it wasn't a penalty. Max says Gabi Jesus was asked about this, and he gave his justification why it should be a pen. I haven't seen it, what he said. Leroy says, not a pen for me. We are too weak, and it looked a bit embarrassing. Shunito, though, says penalty for me. Matthew says no penalty. Jesus runs across the Brighton player's run and gets lightly bumped. Kingsley says not a pen for me, but they give it against Arsenal. Well, that's a different story. Mike says Son against us 2 years ago is all I'll say. I mean, the 21-22 example was, 3.5 years ago, so I'm assuming it's a different example that you're talking about. I also think it's really important not to compare situations like that where there's such a significant amount of time between them, because rules do change. The rule book does change. The interpretation of the rules changes. And so if you're comparing different scenarios from like 3.5 seasons ago, it's not particularly great to do that because the rules do change. Anish says it didn't seem like a penalty in the modern day game. They wouldn't give it at the moment. Olu says I'd call it very clever defending. Yeah, I do tend to agree. I think Jesus and Gyokeres both need to be stronger in those moments to look to win the ball rather than look to win a penalty. Lifter says, I don't agree with you in that Rice was fantastic. I think he was out of position and looked weird. He was out of position because he was asked to play right back. He was also given man of the match. So again, Lifter, I think you're a little bit off, I'm afraid. Paul says, the ref was utterly useless yesterday. We won despite his performance. We've had a few bad refereeing performances in recent weeks. I mean, Stuart Atwell at Palace has got to be one of the worst of the season so far. It was absolutely deplorable. D-Day says, I don't understand how both were not penalties. The defender didn't go for the ball rather than took out. I mean, if he didn't go for the ball, why did he win the ball? That can't be true, can it? Obviously, he did go for the ball because he won it. I don't really understand that one. Peter says, hi, Tom. We look very vulnerable when we concede. We seem to go into panic mode. I agree with you. We do. We look very mentally fragile at the moment. And there's a real fear, I think, at the end of games that we're going to concede. Peter says, Gyokeres just doesn't look good enough for Arsenal. He offers us something, but he's not a touch on Havertz. Matthew says, can people stop comparing pens to those that were given 2 to 3 years ago when the rules were different? There you go, kind of echoing what I said a second ago there. Trinita says, all these Gyokeres fans in the chat can never be truthful. What's this desperation? If it's not working, then it's not working. No objectivity at all. And I'm a fan of his too. And I think that's probably, I think that if you are, like, there's nothing wrong with wanting Gyokeres to succeed. In fact, that's what you should be doing. You should be hoping, as I do, that Gyokeres succeeds. I really want him to succeed. The reality is that he isn't at the moment, and I'm worried about him. I'm worried about the investment at the moment. I'm worried if we made the right decision, but I'm not going to sit here and say that signing has failed in December, because there's no real way to justify that conclusion in December. He needs to be given the season to see if he's going to succeed or not. But absolutely, you're well entitled to say, as I am, that you're a bit worried and concerned about what we've seen so far. But he needs more time. Mike says, that is fair. The rules do change, but we can still feel aggrieved. You can feel aggrieved if you like. I just think that I don't want to see those given as pens, because I think you would see a lot of pens given if that was the case. Seymour says, Rice right back, but with our studs, Hincapié and Saliba, it's like go run all over Declan. Charlie says, how did one manager beat 11 men, Chelsea, with Palmer and Caicedo? But Arteta couldn't beat 10 men that were without them either. Palmer did come off. I think obviously he wasn't fully fit. I think it's because of the way the game, Charlie, was officiated. Obviously, Arsenal didn't have Saliba and Gabriel, and nor did we have a recognised centre-forward. Marino started that game up front. So I think there were obviously a lot of players missing for Arsenal that affected it. But I think more so it was about how the game was officiated for me that cost Arsenal that game. It was too card-friendly. Arsenal had too many bookings, and we couldn't really be as aggressive as we would have hoped to, and didn't get the luck of the draw, a bit like Villa did, obviously, with their first equalising goal. I would have loved to have seen a ball ricochet off Sanchez and then off Marino and go in, but that wasn't the case on the day. So, Chelsea were obviously in far better form at that time as well. They've been an absolute free-fall and in a real mess, Chelsea have been in the last few weeks, and that was a great time to play them, whereas it wasn't when we played them. So a lot of factors, really, Charlie. Every game is different, but I think it's actually quite easy to understand why Arsenal struggled so much to beat Chelsea in that moment when Villa, and by the way, Villa had 0 XG, at half-time. It was second half when the changes were made that they managed to come back. But it was just we were just a bit unlucky, I think, against Chelsea. I wasn't too concerned about the performance. Tom says, while Rice was a good makeshift right back, would you say that we really need him in the midfield against Villa? We'll need our strongest midfield threat. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I'm hoping that Timber is going to be fine for that game. Arthur says, have the rules changed about kicking the ball away after the whistle had gone? Rice was booked and sent off for flicking the ball away last season. I think they have changed a little bit. It has to be really egregious now to get the yellow cards, but I think those rules have changed. I am Safi says, when it comes to the penalty, I like to have a clear guideline for myself. Shoulder to shoulder equals good. Shoulder to back equals bad, but the game is much more nuanced than that these days. And I get that as well. I think, shoulder in the back probably should lead to a foul being given, but it's just not that clear cut these days in the game. There's so many more factors that are taken into account in those moments. Temi says, under Arteta, Aubameyang, Lacazette, and now Gyokeres declined. Only one common denominator here. But equally, Jesus, Havertz have improved. Mikel Merino, even playing centre-forward, have improved. It seems that a certain type of centre-forward just doesn't seem to suit that system, whereas a different type of centre-forward does. So, yeah. And I mean, to say that Aubameyang declined, I mean, there was arguably a natural decline going on there based upon the age profile that he was. So, again, I'm not sure that that's necessarily It's kind of black and white as being painted there. Lucas says, do you think that we could play a back three when we have injuries to our different fullbacks, a double pivot of Rice and Zubi, and play 5 in midfield like a 3-5-2? I just don't think we have the wing back options. I know you could say Trossard or Martinelli and Saka in those wing back roles. I just don't think that's necessarily the right answer. But I'd love to see it just to see if it would work. Yeah. Atez says, Trossard humiliated someone. Are we going to blatantly ignore that? Are we not going to talk about the masterclass as well? I think Trossard had a decent first half. Yes, he was kind of tricky and it was great for those watching, but he didn't have a great game overall, Trossard. You know, he was playing with emotion. He was playing clearly with those Brighton fans very much getting irritated at him. He faded a lot in the second half. I like Trossard. You know, I really, really do rate him as a player, but I think, again, it's a great example maybe of people being drawn into those moments of flair and trickery and thinking a player's better than they are because they pulled off a few tricks. I didn't think this was a great Trossard game. I don't think it was a great game. I think it was a decent game, but I don't think it was a masterclass. Not at all. MRM says, what happened to giving a player a season to settle? It seems it's instant pressure. Or, yeah, there is instant pressure. He doesn't get a season to settle. I'm sorry, he doesn't. No player, Zubimendi, Eza, none of them get a season to settle. None of them. You know, Mosquera gets a little bit more time because he's a younger player, but none of the others none of them get a season to settle. None of them. The reason why they don't get a season to settle is because they're coming into a team that are challenging for a title that we expect us to win this season. You know, when we signed Rice and Havertz and Timber and some of these, you know, we just had a surprise title challenge in 22-23, and we were shocked that we did that. The expectation was for Arsenal to challenge again in 23-24, and they did that. The expectation for Arsenal now is to win it. That is the expectation in 25-6. It was the expectation in 24-5. Injuries obviously really did stop us from doing that, and we're doing it this season in spite of the injuries that we've suffered this season again. But the expectation is that we win it this season. So, yeah, there isn't a season to settle. You do not get a season to settle in 25-6 if you're signing as a £60 million player, a £45 million player as Zubimendi is. Zubimendi is delivering from day dot, straight away. He has been the signing of the summer. He's up there amongst the Premier League signings of the season, but certainly has been our signing of the season. Straight away reacts, performs. Eza is not playing in a different league, and he's had kind of an up and down season so far. I'm not particularly, encouraged by what we've seen so far, but I'm hoping that he's going to respond and he's going to get better and and we've seen more from Eza, of course, than I think we've seen from Victor this season. The Spurs performance, the Palace performance, we've seen some really good, the Leeds performance that we saw. We've seen some really good performances from, was it Leeds or Forest? Forest, sorry, not Leeds. The Forest performance. We've seen some really good things. And so, no, you don't get a season to settle here. You need to raise your standards. Get that emoji going in the chat box if you like. But we're in 25-6 now. We're not in 23-4. We're not in 22-3. We're in 25-6. And we need to see an immediate impact. Zubimendi's doing it. Mosquera's doing it. Kepa's done it. Even to a lesser extent, I've not been Norgard whenever Norgard's been called upon, has been good. Good against Port Vale, was good at centre-half against Bruges, had a great game against Palace. Norgard has delivered in every performance he's played. Zubimendi has performed nearly every minute of the season and has been great. Eza and Victor have not yet done that. Madueke, I think, has impressed. I think Madueke has proven a lot of people wrong so far. Goal against Bayern Munich, fantastic performance against Bruges. I think he's been encouraging when Saka was missing, and he helped us really at the start. Really early on in his Arsenal career, had to play straight away as Victor did, and I think responded well. But so far, Victor and Eza haven't yet done that. So no, they don't get it. And MRM says, just a surprise to see the change. It's always been give the time to settle. Guess the football world has evolved. It shouldn't be surprising to see the change because it's different this season. And we've been consistent about that since the summer, is that this is the expectation this season. The expectation is for Arsenal to win the title. So any player that we sign, especially a player in their mid to late 20s, there is no time to settle. There's no buffer. There's no free hit season. You have to come in and deliver. You have to come in and deliver now. It was different 2-3 seasons ago. There was more of an understanding that we weren't the best version of ourselves yet, and the expectations around the club were not as high as they are in 25-6 as they were in 23-4. Different seasons. The expectation is different. The signings we're making are different. The business that we're doing is different. The intentions are different. The expectation levels are different. It is different now than it was then. Hincapié has come in and been good. He's had some moments where I've been a little bit, but overall he's been good. You know, when you lose Gabriel, who is, in my opinion, the Premier League's best centre-half, and you have to come in and replace that, like Mosquera had to come in and replace Saliba, what Hincapié and Mosquera have done has been impressive. So these players have delivered, but so far we're still waiting for Eza and Gyokeres to deliver. And we need more from them. We do need more. And we particularly need more from Eza in games where we're away from home and he's playing and can go missing. We just need more from Victor overall. We need more from him. He needs to adapt more. Yes, we can do more to adapt to him, but the Premier League's not going to adapt to him. The Premier League is going to be the horrible, defensively challenging, striker swallowing kind of league that it is. And he needs to react to that and to us. So, yeah. And we can't say he's not getting service, because he is. He's getting chances. He had 2 good opportunities, didn't take them. You know, so we need more. And it's not just those 2. We need more from others in the team. We need more from Saka at the moment. We need more from Leo. We need more. We've needed more from Ødegaard this season, and he delivered that, yesterday. So we've needed more from some of these players. It really is, for me, as simple as that. We shouldn't be afraid to say that either. Let's scroll up a little bit more, because I know I've just been talking for a little while, so I would have missed some of your comments. Oz says Gyokeres needs to do more, like his move in the second minute, pushing defenders out of his way to get to the ball. Better finishing would be good as well, but he needs to be able to push those defenders and win those physical battles more. I agree with you. Ethel says Eza is not aggressive enough on the ball. He's too laid back sometimes, and he gets pulled aside. He needs to be more physical. And he says, why don't people feel that Jesus and Gyokeres should both play together? They were clearly complementing attributes. We can drop a left winger for a marauding left back in Calafiori and play a 4-4-2. To change the system so dramatically at this point of the season, I don't think is realistic. I think we're ultimately going to play one over the other. Charlie says, facts, Tom. We don't have time to waste. No more giving players and managers time either. Deliver now or jog on. It's about delivering. It's not about binary football. I think, Charlie, you're conflating the two there. It's about showing progression. It's about showing that you're delivering. Arsenal have continued to get better over the last 5 seasons. Overall, we are getting better. Last season, a little bit of a dip, and I think, to be honest, that was because of the injuries more than anything else. And I've always said I actually think that, last season was the most impressed I've been that Arteta managed to get as far as he did with what was available to him during that season. 2nd and 2 cup semi-finals after having 27 separate injuries was mad, but he did it, and it all nearly got even more. But this season is all about winning. We're doing what we're doing even more so in spite of injuries this season. We've had to lose Saliba and Gabriel. Before we missed Saliba and Gabriel at Chelsea, that had happened once before in 2 years that we weren't able to use both of them in a Premier League game, either of them. So, look, this season is about delivering. This season is about progressing further and claiming silverware. Silverware is a must. It really, really is this season. And they know that. They're not under any illusion. I'm not saying anything shocking or surprising. That they know that. That's what they're aiming for. Vince says 3 years finishing second with Havertz and Jesus, and people are asking for an out-and-out centre forward. We get one and already writing him off. Vincent, I've not said anything that writes him off. Nothing I've said writes him off. Everything I've said raises concerns, but also encourages patience to see if he can adapt. And we say 3 years of finishing second, like Arsenal weren't in the absolute wilderness and nowhere near that level prior to Jesus and Havertz coming in. Jesus and Havertz are the most successful centre forwards that we've had in terms of getting Arsenal to where we are in the league since the days where Arsenal were getting nowhere near those levels. Nowhere near. So the way you've written that is obviously inflammatory and misleading, but you know that. So I don't need to really give you a lecture on it. Jabu says, James said Havertz was expected to start and Gyokeres would be understudy to him at the start of the season. And that makes me think Arsenal always expected Gyokeres to start slow. Yeah, and I said that before. He really has suffered without Havertz being there to kind of ease his way in. And have that extra layer of protection. Xmas Arsenal says, we're obviously going to win the title, though, in my opinion, but we're not going to win the title if Arteta rots our lads' brains. What? But Arteta has been a great manager, especially with our wins. I don't understand what you mean. I have no idea. Arsenal says, how do you think Arteta will attack the Villa game? Cautious, slow, and resilient on set pieces, or will he go all guns blazing? If I know Arteta, and I think I do, I think he'll be pretty cautious, mate. I think it'll be very controlled. I think it'll be dominant. I think he'll try and, really limit Villa to as much as feasibly possible. But they have come to Arsenal and tactically undone us many times. Unai Emery is no doubt Arteta's kryptonite. No doubt he is Arteta's kryptonite, and he needs to find a way to beat him. Emery is a tactically brilliant manager. And then he has the right tools at his disposal. He can beat any team, but Arsenal need to find a way to stop this awful run against Villa. DDV says, with our shortage of left backs, do you think Saka could play there and bring Noni at right wing? I don't think so, no. I know he started life there, but it was a very different time. I don't think so. I'd rather play Nkapie left back. Tim says every team has a drop-off in form during the season, but it's all about still winning. We've been hit with injuries recently. We're missing players, and a lot of our team are coming back from injury as well. And we're winning, and we're still top. We're still picking up victories. Lifter says, what do you think about the Waneri loan to Bournemouth rumours? I hope he leaves on loan and we have 4 players that can do the 10 role. I don't want him to leave in January. I'd happily loan him out in the summer, but I don't want to loan him in January. No, thank you. Charlie says, there has been no delivery from Arteta in the last 5 years. Every other team has won a trophy since the FA Cup. I mean, not every other team has won a trophy. But you look at football in a binary way and I don't. And that's the difference between us. But so we're never going to see eye to eye on how we judge Arteta. And that's fine. People look at football in different ways and we accept that. But we're just going to have to agree to disagree, Charlie, unfortunately, because we just look at football differently. Anish says, I feel that the number of corner goals must rise with Gabriel back. I don't feel the finishing is clinical enough, and we might not be able to win tough games with this attack. I do tend to agree. Maximius says, Tom, Villa played away to Chelsea and play us in 2 days. So do they go home and return to London? Yeah, they will go back. I'll be very surprised if they didn't. They've got to go back. They've got to train. They've got to recover. And all their facilities are in Birmingham. It's only a 2-hour drive from London. It's not that far. Would you take a draw against Villa? No, I wouldn't, Anish. We need to win the game. Reece says, Gyokeres is flopping like a United signing is. Yeah, both Šeško and Gyokeres this season are flopping. No doubt about that. I was always curious to see what Šeško would have done if he'd have signed for Arsenal. It's, signing for United was a bit of a death wish, unfortunately, to his career. And it seems that is that theory is coming true. No, Matty Cash is definitely a help, 100%. John says we've only lost 2 games all season. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. You would think we'd lost more than that based upon how people are talking about Arsenal. Mike says, I'm actually beginning to dislike Unai. It's taken you this long, really. The guy has taken it personally that we got rid of him, and I think I should take these 3 points he keeps getting us personally. I mean, I don't think it's that. He does step up for Arsenal, obviously, but anyone steps up for Arsenal because it's Arsenal. We just have that effect on people. Eddie says, who do you think should start at centre forward against Villa? Jesus. John says, yes, it is. If we finish the season with only 2 losses, we will win the league. I hope you're right. D-Day says, do you think bringing on Gyokeres in the 60th minute will change our dropping off in games recently? The team seems to drop defensively around that period. I think we hopefully will see that against Villa and bringing Gyokeres on later. But, I mean, we brought Gyokeres on against Villa away from home and he was awful. So, yeah, it's no guarantee that you're going to see an improvement if you bring him from the bench as well. Anthony says, I didn't see the match. How did Gabriel look when he came on? Yeah, I mean, he looks like a player who'd not played in a long while, but there was definitely really encouraging signs. 123 says, Jesus doesn't press. I wouldn't start him. He does. John says, Man United have more set-piece goals than us this season now. Yeah, I mean, the set-piece thing was always had a finite, it always had a time limit on it. It was never going to go through the whole season. So it was always a bit strange when we talked about it as much as we did. Jay says, yes, we're top of the Premier League and top of the Champions League and a semi-final of the Carabao Cup, but Arteta must do more. He needs to continue doing what he's doing. Like, if Arsenal continue to dominate games, if they continue to create high XG, if they continue to be what they are right now, then we are in a good place because we're winning. We're not winning convincingly enough at the moment, but we aren't playing badly. If we were narrowly scraping by teams by barely having a shot and our XG wasn't very high, I would be very concerned. But we aren't. We are beating teams, but we're beating them in a way in which we are all sitting here saying we should be winning by more. We have created the chances to win these games better and more convincingly. We're not sitting here after games and saying, well, we scraped by them, didn't we? You know, we only just did enough to win that game. We're not saying that. We're saying we should be beating these teams by more based upon what we are looking at in those 90-plus minutes. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing that that's the criticism that we have. If your criticism is we should be winning games by more, that's a pretty good place to have a criticism from, because you're clearly winning, but we feel that we should be winning by more. So that's just simple as that, really. It's nothing more than that. Misunderstood Ninja says, why is Ødegaard not shooting more? Is it that injury still up? What? Did you watch yesterday's game? He scored from outside the box. Great strike. Honestly. MMH says Wolves scored 2 own goals. Yeah, they do that. They do that. And we seem to have a little bit of luck when it comes to that. But they did score 2 own goals in the game that we played them. But again, we should have won that game by more. I rewatched that game, and I remember speaking after the Wolves game and saying that was horrendous, one of the worst performances of the season. I watched it back and I thought, oh, it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was when I first watched it. So again, I always recommend people rewatch games because it does give you a different perspective. You aren't as emotional or as distracted sometimes. And certainly I can be distracted during games because I'm working. But yeah, I'd always recommend rewatching games. Yes, I did. I did put myself through that Wolves game again. And it wasn't great, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad as I thought it was during the game. Jabu says, we need Jesus against Konsa and Lindelof. They are not great at running around. They are good at sitting back and defending deep, though, which is obviously what seems to be the kryptonite to Gyokeres. Culture Mark says, Tom, do you know how many times the mighty Arsenal won 1-0 during the 98 double-winning season? I rest my case. Where do you think the famous chant comes from? Spimmer says, credit to you. I could never put myself through that again. John says, opponents sputtering about own goals and set pieces, but never think about how much Arsenal dominate to get that luck. We create it yet. The own goals come from, set piece goals come from open play. They come from moments that we create. They come from moments of dominance. They come from us putting the pressure on. They don't just spawn out of nowhere. Goalkeepers aren't getting the ball from a kickoff and kicking it in the back of their own net. We're not heading the ball into the back of the net from set pieces on the regular. I know it happened against Brighton yesterday with Rutter, but we're winning that corner from open play. We're putting that delivery into the box and forcing those errors. So, yeah, there's always a bit from open play that will lead to these moments that Arsenal get so heavily criticised for. Right, that's going to bring us to the end of today's show. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your weekend. It's this weird period, isn't it, between Christmas and New Year's where every day kind of merges into one another. But thank you so much, as always, for listening. Greatly appreciate you being here. Do drop a like on the video. Do subscribe to the channel if you're new around here before we wrap up. And if you, of course, are watching this on catch up, you can hype the video as well. So yeah, hype it if you're listening on catch up. And if you're watching this or listening to this on audio platforms as well, thank you so much. Leave a kind review. We really do appreciate it. Thank you, as always. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.